The lights in the Great Hall of Concordia Prime had never seemed so dim. Ambassador Ceasefire stood before the 12 seats of the Galactic Council, his forearms trembling slightly as he held the datapad containing the evidence. For 300 years, the Council had kept peace across 47 star systems. Now, one species threatened to destroy everything they had built. "Show them the recordings," said High Chancellor Vextar from the center seat. Her voice carried the weight of centuries, and even the youngest council members felt the gravity in her words. The holographic display flickered to life above the center of the hall. The first image showed a human vessel, small and crude by council standards, somehow managing to disable a Veltar patrol ship. The second showed 3 human mining ships working together to capture a council freight convoy. The third image made several council members gasp. "This," Ceasefire said, his voice barely steady, "is the heavy cruiser Dominant Victory. It was attacked by what our intelligence believed to be human pirates using cargo haulers and mining equipment." The recording played in silence. Everyone watched as 6 human ships, none of them military vessels, swarmed around the massive council warship like insects around a dying animal. They moved in patterns that made no sense, attacking from angles that should have been impossible, using weapons that looked like they had been built in someone's garage. "The Dominant Victory was completely disabled," Ceasefire continued. "The humans took everything valuable and left the crew floating in escape pods with enough supplies to survive. They even left medical aid for the wounded." "Barbarians," muttered Councillor Nexival of the Keth Dominion. "No civilized species attacks and then provides medical care. It shows they have no understanding of proper warfare." High Chancellor Vextar raised one of her hands for silence. "Continue the report, Ambassador." The display changed to show a star map. Red dots marked incidents across 6 star systems, 17 border conflicts, 3 mining disputes that had turned violent, 2 instances of human ships appearing in restricted space without any explanation of how they had gotten there. "In every case," Ceasefire explained, "the humans have shown complete disregard for established boundaries, council law, and proper military procedure. They attack with inferior weapons but somehow achieve victory. They retreat when they should fight and fight when they should retreat. Our military advisors cannot predict their behavior." Councillor Kethmar of the Hegemony leaned forward. "What do we know about their military capacity?" "That is the problem," Ceasefire admitted. "We know almost nothing. Our intelligence suggests they have perhaps 50 military vessels total, scattered across their colonies. But these attacks suggest better coordination than that should allow." The hall fell silent except for the soft humming of the station's life support systems. Each council member knew what this meant. For 3 centuries they had maintained peace through a simple principle: overwhelming technological superiority. When a species became troublesome, the council would demonstrate their power, and the problem would end, but humans seemed immune to intimidation. "There is only one solution," High Chancellor Vextar finally said. "We issue an ultimatum. Total cessation of all military activities beyond their home system, or we demonstrate why the Council has remained unchallenged for 300 years. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the message was prepared and transmitted to the human territories. High Arbitrator Nexival himself would deliver it personally, aboard the diplomatic vessel Peaceful Resolution. Escorted by 12 Council warships, Admiral Sarah Chen was reviewing supply reports when the communication came through. She sat in the command chair of the U.S. Indomitable, humanity's largest warship, while her fleet conducted what the official reports called routine training exercises near the Kepler 442 system. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, "we're receiving a priority transmission on all frequencies. It's big." "Define big, Lieutenant." "The entire transmission is coming from a ship that masses about 4 times what our heaviest cruiser weighs, and it's got an escort of 12 vessels, each one bigger than the Indomitable." Admiral Chen felt a familiar tightness in her stomach. She had been expecting this for months. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and High Arbitrator Nexival appeared. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across his face. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of countless worlds. "I am High Arbitrator Nexival of the Galactic Council, speaking for 47 member species and 12 sovereign governments. I address Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Systems, and through her, the entire human race." Chen gestured for her communications officer to open a channel, but she remained silent for now. The Galactic Council has observed human military activities with growing concern, Nexval continued. Your species has engaged in 17 unauthorized military actions, violated the territorial sovereignty of 6 member species, and demonstrated a complete disregard for established interstellar law. Around the bridge, Chen's officers exchanged glances. She could see the tension in their faces, but also something else. Pride, maybe, or anticipation. Therefore, Nexval said, the Galactic Council issues this ultimatum to humanity. All human military vessels will immediately withdraw to your home system. All military activities beyond the Sol system will cease permanently. You have 72 hours to comply. The screen went dark for a moment. Then Nexval reappeared. Should humanity fail to comply with this ultimatum, the Galactic Council will consider your species a threat to interstellar peace and act accordingly. Our military capacity exceeds yours by several orders of magnitude. Resistance would be futile and costly in human lives. The transmission ended. For several seconds, the bridge of the Indomitable was completely silent. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres said carefully. They're waiting for a response. Chen looked around her bridge. These people had followed her through 3 years of what the politicians back on Earth called aggressive exploration, and what everyone else called starting fights with aliens. They had never lost a battle, but they had also never faced anything like the force that was currently sitting just outside sensor range. She thought about the message she would send back to Earth, about the meetings that would happen in sterile conference rooms where people who had never been in space would debate the wisdom of defying the Galactic Council. She thought about the other fleets scattered across 6 star systems, the new shipyards that didn't officially exist, and the projects that were moving forward under names that wouldn't appear in any public records. Then she smiled. Lieutenant Torres, open a channel. Broadcast on all frequencies, maximum power. I want everyone to hear this. Channel open, Admiral. Chen stood up from her command chair and faced the main screen. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. High Arbitrator Nexval, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Systems. I have received your ultimatum and shared it with my fleet commanders. She paused for a moment, knowing that this transmission would reach not just the Council ships, but every human vessel within 50 light years. It would be recorded and replayed countless times in the coming days. We appreciate the Council's concern for interstellar peace, she continued. However, I'm afraid we must respectfully decline your generous offer to surrender. Another pause. In the distance, she could see the Council escort ships moving into a more aggressive formation. Please tell the Council that humanity is grateful for their attention, but we're just getting started. The transmission ended, and Admiral Chen sat back down in her command chair. Around her, the bridge crew was grinning despite the overwhelming odds they now faced. Lieutenant Torres, she said calmly, send a message to all fleet commanders. Operation Wildfire is now active, and get me a channel to Earth Command. I think it's time to let them know about our little secret. In the depths of space, 12 Council warships began powering their weapon systems, while in the shadows of nearby asteroids, 37 human vessels waited for orders that would change the galaxy forever. War Commander Tixlan had fought in 17 campaigns across 9 star systems. He had commanded fleets that brought entire species to their knees, and enforced Council law on worlds that thought themselves beyond reach. But as he studied the intelligence reports about humanity's military capacity, he felt something he had not experienced in decades: doubt. These numbers cannot be correct, he said to his intelligence officer, a thin Kethri with nervous habits. 50 ships total? Primitive weapons? No significant orbital defenses around their homeworld? The data comes from our best sources, War Commander, the officer replied, fidgeting with his datapad. Human military technology appears to be approximately 200 years behind Council standards. Their largest warship mass is less than one of our escort frigates. Tixlan stood in the command center of the Council dreadnought Absolute Authority, surrounded by tactical displays showing his strike force. 50 ships, including 3 heavy cruisers and 8 dreadnoughts. It was overwhelming force by any reasonable measure, certainly enough to handle a primitive species with 50 outdated warships. Very well, he decided. We proceed with the original plan. A demonstration of force at their primary military installation should be sufficient to end this nonsense. The intelligence had identified the orbital platforms around Mars as humanity's main military stronghold, 3 space stations and perhaps a dozen defensive platforms according to the reports. Tixlan's force could reduce them to debris in minutes. What the intelligence reports had not mentioned was Captain Maria Santos and the Third Fleet. Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Resolute, watching her tactical display track the approaching Council force. Around her, 15 ships maintained formation in the shadow of Mars's largest moon. They were officially a training squadron, ships and crews that didn't exist in any public records. "They're moving exactly as predicted," reported Commander Jackson from the sensor station. "Single formation, direct approach to the orbital platforms. They're not even scanning for additional contacts." Santos nodded. The Council's tactical doctrine was apparently as rigid as their diplomacy. Overwhelming force applied directly to the most obvious target. It probably worked well against species that followed the same rules. "Signal the platforms to begin evacuation," she ordered, "and send word to Admiral Chen. The Council has taken the bait." Tixlan's confidence began to waver as his force approached the Mars orbital platforms. The human defenders were not responding as expected. Instead of powering up weapons and shields in a defensive posture, the platforms were launching escape pods and shuttles. The humans were abandoning their most important military base without a fight. "War Commander," his tactical officer called out, "I'm detecting movement from behind the 4th moon. Multiple contacts approaching fast." The display updated to show 15 human ships emerging from concealment. They were smaller than his escorts, moving in a loose formation that violated every principle of military tactics. But they were moving fast, accelerating at rates that should have been impossible for ships their size. 15 ships against 50. Tixlan muttered. "Have they lost their minds?" Captain Santos watched the Council formation begin to turn toward her fleet. The alien ships moved like a parade formation, precise and predictable, beautiful in a way, but completely wrong for actual combat. "All ships, this is Resolute," she transmitted. "Execute Pattern 7. Show them what human tactics look like." The Third Fleet scattered like a school of fish sensing a predator. 3 ships dove toward Mars's atmosphere, using the planet's gravity well to slingshot around at impossible angles. 4 more accelerated straight toward the Council formation before splitting apart at the last second. The remaining 8 ships seemed to disappear entirely. Tixlan watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The human ships were moving in patterns that made no sense. They accelerated when they should have retreated, split up when they should have concentrated, and seemed to ignore basic physics in some of their maneuvers. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "target lock is impossible. They're changing direction too rapidly for our tracking systems." That was when the UES Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace behind Earth's moon, bringing the First Fleet with her. Admiral Chen studied her tactical display with satisfaction. Tixlan's force was exactly where intelligence had predicted it would be, focused entirely on the Mars platforms and scattered across several thousand kilometers of space, trying to track Santos's ships. "Admiral," called her tactical officer, "we have clean firing solutions on their command ships." "Not yet," Chen replied. "Let's give Captain Santos a chance to demonstrate human ingenuity first." The first Council ship died when the UES Defiant emerged from Mars's upper atmosphere at nearly 20% of light speed. The human destroyer had used the planet's gravity well to accelerate far beyond safe limits, trading structural integrity for velocity. It slammed into the Council cruiser's flank like a kinetic projectile, tearing through shields and armor as if they were paper. The second ship fell to a coordinated missile strike from vessels that had seemed to vanish, but were actually hiding in Mars's debris field, using stealth technology that Council sensors couldn't detect. "This is impossible," Tixlan said, watching his formation dissolve into chaos. "How are they doing this?" His question was answered when 3 human ships appeared to ram straight into his defensive line, only to split apart at the last second into dozens of smaller craft. What had looked like 3 ships were actually 9, using modular designs that could separate and recombine in space. The Council's superior technology meant nothing when they couldn't predict where their enemies would be or what they would do. Next, Admiral Chen waited until the Council formation was completely disrupted before giving the order to attack. The First Fleet emerged from behind Earth's moon like a hammer falling on an anvil. catching Tixlan's scattered ships between two human forces. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, 23 Council ships were destroyed or disabled. Tixlan's own flagship limped away with its engines barely functional and its weapons offline. The remaining Council ships retreated in complete disorder, some of them firing at shadows as they fled. "Admiral," Captain Santos reported from the Resolute, "enemy survivors are withdrawing beyond the heliopause. Should we pursue?" Chen considered it. The smart military decision would be to let them go, to avoid escalating the conflict. But looking at her tactical display, seeing how completely they had outfought a supposedly superior force, she felt something she hadn't expected. Hunger. "Pursue them," she ordered. "But don't destroy them. I want survivors to carry word back to the Council about what they've seen here." As the human fleets began their pursuit, Chen opened a channel to Earth Command. General Morrison appeared on her screen, his face carefully neutral despite what he had just witnessed. "Congratulations, Admiral," he said, "though I suspect this is only the beginning." "Yes, sir," Chen replied. The Council thought they were dealing with 50 ships and primitive technology. Time to show them how wrong they were. "The other fleets are ready?" "Third and fourth fleets are already moving to their assigned positions. The fifth fleet will deploy once we've finished here." "And General, Project Prometheus is ahead of schedule." Morrison nodded slowly. "Then God help us all. Because after today, the entire galaxy is going to want us dead." Tixlan sat in his damaged command chair, watching the tactical display show human ships pursuing his retreating forces. Around him, his officers worked frantically to keep basic systems operational. The humans could have destroyed them all, but they had chosen not to. The insult was almost worse than total defeat would have been. "War Commander," his communications officer called out. "We're intercepting human transmissions." "What are they saying?" The officer hesitated. "Sir, they're discussing construction schedules for 12 new shipyards, recruitment drives across 30 colony worlds, and something called Project Prometheus." "The technical specifications, sir, some of this technology is beyond our current understanding." Tixlan closed his eyes. The Council's intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. Humanity hadn't built one secret navy. They had built multiple fleets hidden across dozens of systems, using technology that shouldn't exist. And if the intercepted transmissions were accurate, what they had just faced was only the beginning. "Set course for Concordia Prime," he ordered. "Maximum speed. The Council needs to know what we're really dealing with." Behind them, human ships continued their pursuit, not to destroy, but to demonstrate. The message was clear. Earth's children had grown up, and they were no longer content to hide in their home system. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their complete refusal to fight the way everyone else expected them to. High Arbitrator Nexaval stared at the holographic display showing the aftermath of the Mars engagement. 23 Council ships destroyed or crippled. A strike force that should have easily overwhelmed humanity's entire military had been routed by forces that, according to their intelligence, should not have existed. "Explain to me," he said slowly, "how our intelligence was so completely wrong." Intelligence Director Kelvin shuffled through his data pads nervously. "High Arbitrator, all of our sources confirmed the same information. 50 ships maximum primitive technology, no significant defenses. And yet War Commander Tixlan reports facing over 60 vessels using technology he couldn't identify, weapons that shouldn't work, and tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare." The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been in progress for 6 hours. Around the Great Hall, representatives from 12 species debated, argued, and demanded explanations that no one could provide. "The humans are cheating," declared Councillor Vextar of the Hegemony. "No species achieves this level of coordination without proper command protocols. No military force operates effectively without standardized equipment and doctrine." "Perhaps," Nexval replied. "That is exactly why they are so effective." The recordings from Tixlan's surviving ships played on the main display. Human vessels that split apart in the middle of battle, ships accelerating beyond safe limits to use themselves as kinetic weapons. Weapons that appeared to be improvised from industrial equipment but somehow penetrated Council shields. "They're not fighting like a military," observed Councillor Kethmar. "They're fighting like criminals." Pirates, revolutionaries. And it's working, Nexeval said grimly, which means we need a new approach. The decision was made to deploy the Iron Phalanx, 200 ships under Fleet Admiral Kethmar's direct command. The plan was simple and elegant. Establish a blockade at Wolf 359, the primary hyperspace route between human space and the galactic core. Cut them off, force them back to their home system, and demonstrate Council superiority through overwhelming numbers. It was a good plan. It might even have worked against any other species in the galaxy. Commander James Wright studied the tactical projection in the cramped command center of the UES Audacity. Around him, his staff planned what military textbooks would probably classify as collective suicide. 200 ships, he said thoughtfully. That's significantly more than we faced at Mars. Yes, sir, replied Lieutenant Commander Park from the intelligence station. But they're spread across 3 systems in a blockade formation. Standard Council doctrine calls for mutual support between defensive positions. Wright nodded. Council military doctrine was elegant, logical, and completely predictable. They established strong positions and forced their enemies to attack where they were strongest. It worked well against species that followed similar tactical principles. Humans, however, had never been particularly interested in fighting fair. Signal all ships, Wright ordered. We're implementing the Hydra Protocol. Every ship for itself, maximum chaos. Primary objective is to make the Council think they're fighting 3 times as many vessels as we actually have. The Audacity was officially a heavy cruiser, though most of her tonnage came from modular cargo pods that could be jettisoned and reconfigured in space. Attached to her hull were 12 civilian vessels that were actually disguised warships, each one capable of independent operation. Sir, called his communications officer. The volunteer fleet is ready, Wright smiled grimly. The volunteer fleet consisted of actual civilian vessels whose crews had decided that transporting supplies to human colonies was less important than shooting at aliens who thought they could dictate terms to Earth's children, mining ships with military-grade sensors, cargo haulers carrying missile pods, even a luxury liner that had been converted into an electronic warfare platform. Execute Hydra Protocol, Wright ordered. Show them what happens when humans get creative. Fleet Admiral Kethmar commanded the Iron Phalanx from the bridge of the heavy dreadnought Unyielding Resolve. His formation stretched across 3 star systems, 200 ships positioned to intercept any human force attempting to break out of their territory. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures throughout the blockade zone. At least 30 contacts, possibly more. Finally, Kethmar muttered, a proper battle. Signal all ships to maintain formation and prepare for engagement. What happened next would be studied in military academies for decades, assuming any of them survived to conduct the analysis. The human ships didn't attack the blockade. They ignored it entirely. Instead of trying to break through Council lines, human forces scattered across 17 different systems, striking supply depots, communication relays, and isolated outposts. They appeared where they shouldn't be able to go, using hyperspace routes through unstable star systems that no sane navigator would attempt. Sir, Kethmar's communications officer called out, we're receiving distress calls from Outpost 7, the supply depot at Kepler 186, and the relay station at Gliese 667, all under attack simultaneously. Impossible, Kethmar replied. Our intelligence shows only 40 human ships in this entire sector. The attacks appear to be coordinated, sir. And the human ships, they're using weapons we've never seen before. The reports flooded in throughout the next 6 hours, human vessels that reconfigured themselves during battle, turning from cargo haulers into missile platforms in minutes, weapons that appeared to be improvised from mining equipment, but somehow penetrated military-grade shields. Tactics that made no sense but were devastatingly effective. At the supply depot, 3 human ships had somehow convinced the automated defense system that they were friendly vessels delivering supplies. They docked normally, then revealed themselves when their crews began planting explosives throughout the station. At the communication relay, a single human vessel had appeared to surrender, broadcasting distress signals and requesting assistance. When Council ships moved to investigate, the damaged vessel had exploded, taking 2 Council escorts with it in what appeared to be a planned sacrifice. They're fighting like madmen, Kethmar's tactical officer reported. No regard for proper military procedure. No concern for acceptable losses. Sir, they're using crews as expendable assets. Or, Kethmar said slowly, their crews are volunteering for missions that other species would consider suicide. The trap at Proxima Centauri was the final straw. Commander Wright had spent 3 days leading a running battle across 4 systems, drawing Council forces away from their defensive positions. His ships were damaged, his crews exhausted, but he had accomplished his mission. The Iron Phalanx was scattered across half the sector, chasing ghosts and responding to attacks that dissolved before they could be properly engaged. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Park reported, Fleet Admiral Kethmar is approaching with the main force. 60 ships, including 5 dreadnoughts. Perfect, Wright replied. Signal the asteroid field. Time to show them what human engineering can accomplish, with enough explosives and complete disregard for safety regulations. The asteroid field around Proxima Centauri had been a mining operation until 6 months ago. Officially, it had been abandoned due to economic concerns. Unofficially, it had been converted into the largest weapons platform in human space. Mining charges had been repurposed as ship killers. Ore processing equipment had been converted into kinetic projectiles. Freight containers had been fitted with drone swarms that could operate independently for weeks. When Kethmar's force entered the asteroid field in pursuit of Wright's damaged ships, they found themselves in a killing ground that defied every principle of civilized warfare. The asteroids themselves began moving, revealing hidden thrusters and guidance systems. What had appeared to be natural debris turned out to be camouflaged weapons platforms. Cargo containers that had been floating dead in space suddenly erupted with missile swarms and energy weapons. This is impossible, Kethmar said, watching his formation dissolve under fire from enemies that shouldn't exist. Asteroid fields cannot be militarized. The engineering requirements alone, sir, his sensor operator called out. I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the field. It's not just weapons platforms, sir. They've turned the entire asteroid belt into a single coordinated defensive system. The Iron Phalanx lost 80 ships in 30 minutes. The survivors retreated in complete disorder, leaving behind not just their dead, but their confidence in Council military superiority. As the last Council ships fled beyond the system's edge, Commander Wright opened a channel to Admiral Chen. Admiral, he reported, the Iron Phalanx has been neutralized. The blockade is broken, and we've demonstrated that human territory is not a place where Council fleets can operate safely. Excellent work, Commander, Chen replied. Now comes the interesting part. Intelligence reports that the Council is preparing to deploy weapons they haven't used in over 1,000 years. Planet killers, among other things. It seems we've gotten their attention. Are your people ready for the next phase? Wright looked around his bridge at the faces of men and women who had just fought the impossible and won. They were tired, battered, and absolutely ready to do it again. The emergency session had been running for 18 hours straight. In the Great Hall of Concordia Prime, representatives from 12 species sat in stunned silence as High Arbitrator Nexval read the casualty reports. 3 major fleet actions, 412 ships destroyed or disabled, 16 military installations reduced to debris, and in every engagement, human forces have demonstrated capabilities that our intelligence services insist should not exist. Counselor Vextar of the Hegemony slammed her 3 fists on the table. This is unacceptable. We are the Galactic Council. We have maintained order for 3 centuries. We cannot allow a single primitive species to humiliate us. Primitive? Nexval asked quietly. Counselor, I suggest you review the technical analysis of their weapons. Kinetic projectiles that achieve 97% of light speed. Energy weapons that somehow bypass our shield technology. Ships that reconfigure themselves during battle using modular systems we didn't think possible. The holographic display showed footage from the Proxima Centauri engagement. Council officers watched in horror as human ships seemed to materialize from nowhere, as asteroids revealed themselves to be weapons platforms, as cargo containers transformed into swarms of autonomous fighters. They fight without honor, declared Counselor Cale Thin of the Collective. No proper formation. No adherence to established combat doctrine. They use civilian vessels as military assets and sacrifice crews for tactical advantage. And it works, said Counselor Kethmar grimly. Every tactic we deploy against them, they counter with something we've never seen before. They adapt faster than our commanders can adjust. It's as if they're fighting an entirely different kind of war. The debate had raged for hours, but everyone knew where it was heading. 3 major fleets destroyed or scattered, human forces operating freely throughout 6-star systems, and reports from the Outer Rim that human vessels had been spotted in territories no Council ship had ever explored. There is only one option remaining, High Chancellor Vextar finally said. We must deploy the Extinction Fleet. The hall fell silent. The Extinction Fleet was a weapon of last resort. 40 planet-killer vessels held in reserve for threats to galactic civilization itself. In over a millennium, they had never been deployed against a living species. High Chancellor, Nexaval said carefully, the deployment of planet-killers against inhabited worlds. It has been over 1,000 years since such weapons were authorized. And in over 1,000 years we have never faced a threat like this, Vextar replied. The humans have demonstrated that conventional military force cannot contain them. They show no respect for established authority, no willingness to negotiate, and no understanding of their proper place in galactic civilization. The vote was close, but the authorization passed. Within hours, orders went out to the most secure military installations in Council space. Ancient weapons built in an era when the galaxy was younger and more violent began powering up for the first time in centuries. But while the Council debated the use of planet killers, Admiral Sarah Chen was implementing Operation Wildfire. The operation had been planned for months, contingent on the Council escalating their response to human expansion. Instead of falling back to defend Earth, Chen had decided to demonstrate exactly how far human influence had spread throughout the galaxy. Signal all fleet commanders, she ordered from the bridge of the Indomitable. Operation Wildfire is now active. Primary objectives are Council military infrastructure. Secondary objectives are any installation that supports their ability to project force beyond their core territories. The response was immediate and devastating. In the Vega system, the Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace directly inside the orbital defense perimeter of Starbase Omega. The Council's largest military depot, supposedly impregnable behind multiple shield arrays and defense platforms, found itself under attack from vessels that had somehow bypassed every early warning system. At Kepler 442, the Fifth Fleet engaged the fortress station at Bastion Prime. The massive installation was designed to control hyperspace routes throughout the sector, its shields powerful enough to withstand bombardment from an entire fleet. The humans didn't attack the shields. They attacked the planet below. Admiral Chen herself led the assault on Bastion Prime, bringing 60 ships against a station that had never been successfully attacked in 200 years of operation. The battle began normally enough with human ships engaging the station's defensive systems, while Council reinforcements rushed to respond. Then the UES Retribution, a heavy cruiser carrying experimental weapons, fired a single projectile at the planet's surface. The projectile was small, barely larger than a torpedo. But it carried something that Council science had declared impossible, a microsingularity, a tiny black hole held in magnetic containment and designed to destabilize gravitational fields. When it struck the planet's surface, the effects were immediate and catastrophic. The planet's gravitational field fluctuated wildly, causing massive tidal forces that began tearing the surface apart. More importantly, the gravitational tethers that held Bastion Prime in stable orbit began to fail. Impossible, whispered the station commander, as his massive fortress began falling toward the planet's surface. They cannot have weaponized black holes. The technology doesn't exist. Sir, his tactical officer called out. Massive structural failure throughout the station. Artificial gravity is failing, life support is compromised, and the main reactor is showing critical instability. The evacuation of Bastion Prime took 6 hours. Council ships worked frantically to rescue personnel from a station that was slowly tearing itself apart as it fell through an increasingly unstable gravitational field. By the time the last shuttle escaped, the fortress was a twisted wreck tumbling through the planet's upper atmosphere. But the evacuation had provided exactly what Admiral Chen needed: chaos and distraction. Boarding teams, go, she ordered. While Council ships focused on rescue operations, human special forces infiltrated the station's core sections. They weren't there to plant explosives or capture prisoners. They were there for something far more valuable: information. The intelligence seized from Bastion Prime's databanks was beyond price. Complete specifications for Council military technology, the locations of every major installation in 12 star systems, production schedules for new ships, and most importantly, the deployment orders for something called the Extinction Fleet. Admiral, reported Captain Martinez from the boarding team, we've got everything. Ship designs, defensive plans, even their contingency protocols for dealing with species-level threats. Species-level threats? Chen asked. Yes, ma'am. According to these files, they're planning to deploy planet-killer weapons against Earth. 40 ships, each one capable of sterilizing an entire world. Chen felt a cold anger settle in her chest. The Council's response to humanity's expansion was genocide. Total extermination, not just of human military forces, but of the entire species. Download everything, she ordered, and prepare a special transmission for Earth Command. I think it's time we showed the Council what humans do when someone threatens our home. The intelligence from Bastion Prime revealed the scope of Council military power throughout the galaxy. But it also revealed something else, how limited their imagination had become. 3 centuries of unchallenged dominance had made them predictable, bureaucratic, and utterly unprepared for opponents who refused to follow established patterns. Over the next 72 hours, human forces struck 47 targets across 6 star systems. Military depots, communication relays, shipyards, and research stations all fell to coordinated attacks that demonstrated just how thoroughly humans had infiltrated territories the Council thought secure. Sir, Intelligence Director Calvin reported to High Arbitrator Nexval, the scope of human military operations is far beyond what we believed possible. They're not just striking randomly. Every target has been carefully selected to maximize damage to our ability to coordinate fleet movements. How many ships are they deploying? Nexval asked. That's the problem, sir. We can't get an accurate count. Human ships appear to reconfigure between engagements, changing their sensor signatures and tactical profiles. What we identify as destroyer-class vessels in one battle appear as heavy cruisers in another. The holographic display showed the pattern of attacks across human-controlled space and beyond. Red dots marked successful strikes against Council installations. Blue dots showed human fleet movements. Green dots indicated territories where human ships had been detected but not engaged. Sir, Calvin continued, the green dots represent the real problem. We're detecting human vessels in star systems we didn't know they could reach. Some of these locations are beyond the galactic rim, in territories no Council ship has ever explored. Nexval studied the display with growing unease. The humans weren't just defending their territory or even expanding it. They were operating throughout the galaxy as if they owned it, striking where they pleased and retreating to sanctuaries that Council forces couldn't find. What about the Extinction Fleet? He asked. Deploying as ordered, sir. 40 ships, all armed with planet-killer weapons. Estimated arrival at Earth in 72 hours. And you're confident this will end the human threat? 1 year had passed since the Galactic Council issued their ultimatum to humanity. High Arbitrator Nexval stood before the emergency assembly on Concordia Prime, holding a datapad that contained statistics no Council member wanted to hear. 47 military installations destroyed or abandoned, he read aloud. Trade routes disrupted across 6 sectors. 3 member species have formally requested separate diplomatic arrangements with humanity. And our intelligence services report that human vessels have been detected in over 200 star systems, including territories we believed were uninhabitable. The Great Hall was quieter than a tomb. Representatives from 12 species sat in their assigned seats, but many of those seats were empty. The Kethri had withdrawn their ambassador, after human forces disabled their primary fleet base. The Veltar were threatening to leave the Council entirely unless something was done about the human problem. How is this possible? Demanded Councillor Vextar. One species, barely capable of interstellar travel a decade ago, has brought the entire Council to its knees. High Chancellor Tixalon, recently promoted after the complete failure of the Iron Phalanx, gestured to the holographic display showing the current tactical situation. Red dots marked confirmed human fleet positions. Blue dots showed probable human activity. Green dots indicated systems where human presence was suspected but unconfirmed. The map was more green and blue than anything else. The problem, Tixalon said grimly, is that we never understood what we were fighting. We assumed humans followed the same limitations as every other species. Single homeworld, limited resources, traditional military hierarchy. We were wrong about everything. The display zoomed in on the outer rim of the galaxy, showing sensor readings that made no sense, massive energy signatures in star systems that should have been empty, construction activities on worlds that Council science had declared uninhabitable, fleet movements through regions of space where no sane navigator would risk a journey. "Sir," called the intelligence coordinator, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen. It's being broadcast on all frequencies throughout Council space." "Put it through," Nexaval ordered. Though he suspected he didn't want to hear what the human admiral had to say, the holographic display flickered, and Admiral Sarah Chen appeared. But something was different about this transmission. She wasn't standing on the bridge of a ship. She was standing in what appeared to be a massive construction facility, with the curve of a planet visible through transparent aluminum windows behind her. "High Arbitrator Nexval," Chen said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent chamber. "I thought it was time for a more detailed conversation about humanity's place in the galaxy." The camera view pulled back, revealing the true scope of what lay behind her. The construction facility stretched for hundreds of kilometers, filled with ships unlike anything in Council space. They were larger than Council dreadnoughts, built with design principles that seemed to ignore basic engineering limitations. "This is Shipyard Complex Alpha," Chen continued, "located approximately 2,000 light-years beyond the galactic rim. One of 12 such facilities currently in operation." Several Council members gasped audibly. The location alone should have been impossible. No species had ever established permanent installations beyond the galaxy's edge. The energy requirements, the resource logistics, the simple challenge of surviving in the void between galaxies. It couldn't be done. "As you can see," Chen said, "we've been busy. The ships you're looking at represent the first production run of our deep space combat fleet. Each vessel is approximately 3 times the mass of your largest dreadnought and incorporates technology you've never encountered." The display changed to show technical schematics that made Council engineers recoil in shock. Ships powered by controlled microsingularities, weapons that manipulated fundamental forces, defensive systems that existed partially outside normal spacetime. "But ships are only part of the story," Chen continued. "Let me show you what else we've accomplished." The transmission shifted to show a star map that encompassed not just the local galaxy, but neighboring galaxies as well. Hundreds of systems marked with human symbols, trade routes spanning impossible distances, colonies on worlds that existed in conditions no known species could survive. Humanity has established permanent settlements in 47 star systems beyond the galactic rim, Chen explained. "We've made contact with 36 species unknown to the Council. We've developed technology that allows us to travel distances your scientists consider impossible. And we've built an infrastructure that makes your entire civilization look like a single city-state." High Arbitrator Nexaval felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of life. True fear. Not fear of death or defeat, but fear of absolute irrelevance. The scale of what Chen was showing them reduced the entire Galactic Council to a minor regional power. "How?" he asked aloud, though he knew the transmission was one way. As if hearing his question, Chen smiled. "You want to know how we did it? The answer is simple. We never accepted your limitations. While you maintained order within the boundaries you'd established, we explored beyond them. While you perfected technology based on principles you understood, we invented technology based on principles we discovered. While you governed the galaxy you knew, we built an empire in the galaxy you feared to explore." The transmission changed again, showing human colonies thriving on worlds that should have been death traps. Cities built inside the event horizons of black holes, using gravitational manipulation technology that Council physics declared impossible, research stations operating in the quantum foam between dimensions. Every challenge you told us was insurmountable. We treated as an engineering problem. Chen continued. Every boundary you said was absolute, we found a way to cross. Every law of physics you said was unbreakable, we learned to bend. Counselor Kethmar leaned forward in his seat. What do they want? He whispered. Total conquest? The destruction of all other species? What is their end goal? Chen's image seemed to look directly at him. Our goal? Growth. Exploration. The endless expansion of human potential and knowledge. We don't want to rule your species or destroy your civilization. We simply want you to understand that your time as the dominant power in this galaxy is over. The display showed the current positions of human fleets. Not just the ships that had fought Council forces, but hundreds of others scattered throughout the galaxy and beyond. Deep space exploration vessels, colony ships heading toward distant stars, research fleets investigating phenomena that Council science had never discovered. This is not conquest, Chen explained. This is evolution. Humanity has outgrown the limitations that constrain every other known species. We've learned to thrive in environments you consider impossible, to solve problems you consider unsolvable, to achieve things you consider impossible. The transmission paused, and when Chen spoke again, her voice carried a note of something that might have been pity. The Galactic Council's time is ending, she said. Not because we're destroying you, but because you've made yourselves irrelevant. While you spent 3 centuries maintaining the status quo, we spent 1 decade rewriting the rules of what's possible. High Chancellor Tixlan stood up abruptly. Signal the extinction fleet, he ordered. Full deployment, all 40 vessels. If they think they can intimidate us with displays of superior technology, the extinction fleet no longer exists, Chen's voice interrupted, though the transmission should have been one way. We disabled all 40 planet-killer vessels 6 months ago. The crews are unharmed and have been provided with transportation back to Council space, along with complete technical specifications for the weapons they were carrying. The silence in the chamber was absolute. You see, Chen continued, we've been monitoring your communications, tracking your fleet movements, and analyzing your technology since this conflict began, not to attack you but to understand you. And what we've learned is that you're not enemies to be defeated. You're simply limited. The final part of the transmission showed something that broke the last of the Council's confidence. A star map showing the positions of every Council fleet, every defensive installation, every secret weapon in their arsenal, all of it known, cataloged, and clearly understood by human intelligence services. We know where all of your ships are, Chen said simply. We know what weapons you possess. We know your strategic plans, your contingency protocols, and your emergency procedures. We've been inside your most secure installations, copied your most classified data, and demonstrated our ability to operate freely throughout your territory. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But we haven't used that knowledge to destroy you. We could have eliminated the entire Council fleet 6 months ago. We could have seized control of your worlds, dismantled your government, and occupied your territory. Instead, we've chosen to show you the future. The transmission began to end, but Chen had one final message. The galaxy is vast beyond your comprehension, she said. There are wonders among the stars that your species will never discover because you're too afraid to look for them. There are challenges that will require cooperation between species you've never encountered. The silver ship landed in the middle of what humans called a parking lot. Dr. Veltar stepped out first, his crystal body catching the sunlight and throwing rainbow patterns across the concrete. Behind him came 3 other aliens, each from different worlds across the galaxy. They all wore the same worried expression. Remember, Veltar said to his team, these are Death World creatures. Their planet is rated Class Twind. That means maximum danger. These humans have survived ice ages, plagues, and natural disasters that would wipe out entire civilizations. Zixka, the insect-like being from Hive World 7, clicked her mandibles nervously. The reports say they have wars for fun. They created something called sports, where they hit each other with sticks. And they eat poison plants, added Thurok, the green-skinned amphibian, for pleasure. The data files show they actually seek out painful food. The 4th team member, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Bloop, pulsed blue with anxiety. Their entertainment industry is based on simulated violence and terror. What kind of species enjoys fear? Veltar checked his equipment one more time. As the galaxy's leading expert on fear responses, he had tested over 2,000 different species. Every single one had predictable terror triggers. Fall from height, universal panic. Predator chase, instant flight response. Existential dread, complete mental breakdown within minutes. But humans were different. The preliminary reports were strange. Humans seemed to laugh at things that made other species faint. They had something called roller coasters that simulated falling to death, and they waited in lines to experience it. They had horror movies that showed terrible things happening, and they watched while eating snacks. Sir, Zixka pointed toward a building with her pointed arm. The humans are gathering. Veltar looked where she pointed. About 30 humans stood outside what their translator called a community center. They were talking and laughing. Some held drinks. A few had small humans with them, offspring according to the files. The children were running around making loud noises, completely unafraid. They looked so normal, Thorak whispered, and they did. The humans came in different sizes and colors, but they all looked soft. No claws, no armor plating, no obvious weapons. Their skin looked thin and easily damaged. Their teeth were small and mostly flat. If Veltar hadn't read the files, he would have thought they were harmless herbivores. Remember, he told his team again, these creatures survived on a planet where the weather can kill you. The animals hunt in packs and diseases spread through the air. They are the most dangerous apex predators the galaxy has ever seen. Do not let their appearance fool you. A female human approached their group. She had gray hair and walked slowly, using a stick. Her face was wrinkled with age. To Veltar, she looked like the most harmless creature he had ever seen. Hello there, she called out, waving her hand. You must be the space folks. I'm Agnes Thompson. Welcome to Earth. The translation device worked perfectly, but Veltar still couldn't believe what he was hearing. This aged human was greeting them like old friends. We are here for the psychological assessment, Veltar said carefully. You understand this is mandatory for joining the Galactic Council? Agnes nodded happily. Oh yes, dear. We're all very excited. My grandson Tommy wanted to come, but he had school. He made me promise to ask if you could come back next weekend. He wants to show you his bug collection. Bug collection. The elderly human's offspring collected other creatures for display. Veltar made a note in his files. This will involve fear response testing, he explained. We will subject you to scenarios designed to trigger terror responses. Many species find the experience unpleasant. Oh, how wonderful. Agnes clapped her hands together. Will it be like those haunted houses at Halloween? My late husband Harold loved those. He used to say the scarier the better. Veltar's crystal body darkened with confusion. You enjoy fear? Well, not all of us, Agnes said thoughtfully. But most folks appreciate a good scare now and then. It gets the blood pumping, makes you feel alive. Behind Veltar, Bloop's entire body turned pale yellow, which meant extreme distress in his species. Agnes led them into the building. Inside, more humans waited. They were sitting in chairs arranged in a circle like they were having a party. Someone had brought cookies. The smell of something sweet filled the air. Everyone, Agnes announced, these are our visitors from space. The humans turned to look at them. Instead of the fearful respect Veltar expected from apex predators, he saw curiosity and friendliness. Several humans waved. One called out, "Welcome to Earth." Another asked, "What's it like traveling between stars?" Veltar set up his equipment in the center of the room. The fear response machine was the size of a small vehicle. It contained holographic projectors, sound generators, chemical dispersers, and psychic amplifiers. The device could create any terrifying scenario and make it seem completely real. How does it work? Asked a young human with bright yellow hair. The machine reads your deepest fears and makes them real, Veltar explained. It accesses your unconscious mind and finds what terrifies you most. Like a nightmare, but when you're awake, the human asked, leaning closer to examine the machine. Much worse than any dream, Zixka said. It creates pure terror. The yellow-haired human grinned. Cool, can I go first? Veltar looked at his team. In 50,000 years of galactic civilization, no one had ever volunteered to go first. Usually they had to drag subjects into the testing chamber. You want to experience fear? He asked. Sure. I love scary stuff. I went skydiving last month, and next week I'm going bungee jumping. My friends say I'm crazy, but I think it's fun. The human had jumped out of aircraft for entertainment. Veltar made another note. Very well, he said. Please stand in the center circle. The human walked over casually, still smiling. Around the room, the other humans watched with interest instead of concern. No one tried to stop their companion. No one looked worried. Veltar activated the machine. First, he would try the universal fears, the ones that worked on every species they had ever tested. The room filled with light, and suddenly the human was standing on the edge of a cliff. Below her stretched an endless drop into darkness. Wind howled around her. Rocks crumbled under her feet. The human looked around with interest. Wow, this is really realistic. The graphics are amazing. She leaned forward to look down into the abyss. In any other species, this would trigger instant panic. The fear of falling was programmed into every evolved creature in the galaxy. The human just whistled appreciatively. That's a long way down. Good thing I'm not afraid of heights. Veltar increased the intensity. The cliff began to collapse. Chunks of rock fell past the human into the void. She had seconds before the entire ledge would crumble away. The human stepped back from the edge and brushed dust off her clothes. This is like that movie with the mountain climbers. What was it called? Oh, right, Cliffhanger. Great special effects in that one, too. The scenario ended. The human walked back to her chair looking pleased. That was fun. Who's next? Around the room, several other humans raised their hands. Veltar stared at his readings. The machine showed the human had experienced the cliff scenario, but her fear levels had actually decreased during the test. That was impossible. Fear responses were supposed to increase when facing mortal danger. Next volunteer, he called out, hoping for better results. A large human male stepped forward. According to the identification he provided, his name was Jack Rodriguez. His file mentioned something called military service, which seemed to involve organized combat. Marine Corps, retired, Jack said, standing straight. 20 years of service. Ready when you are, Doc. Veltar decided to try predator scenarios. Every creature feared being hunted by something larger and more dangerous. He activated the machine again. Jack found himself in a dark jungle. Leaves dripped with moisture. Strange sounds echoed through the trees. Then the predator appeared, a massive alien creature with razor claws and glowing red eyes. It moved like liquid shadow, hunting him through the undergrowth. Jack crouched behind a fallen log and watched the creature pass by. Instead of running or hiding, he studied its movement patterns. Interesting hunting style, he said quietly, but it's making too much noise. Real predators are quieter, and it's not checking the trees for threats from above. Poor tactical awareness. The alien monster caught his scent and charged directly at him, roaring with a sound that had made seasoned warriors faint on other worlds. Jack stood up and faced it calmly. The roar gives away its position. That's a rookie mistake. In real combat, you never announce your attack. He paused, thinking, though it might be trying to scare prey into running, fear makes targets predictable. The creature's claws passed right through Jack's body. The hologram couldn't actually hurt him, but the psychological impact should have been devastating. Nice special effects, Jack said, walking through the dissipating monster. Reminds me of that movie, Predator. Arnold Schwarzenegger classic. Have you seen it? Veltar ended the scenario quickly. His instruments showed Jack's heart rate had barely increased. If anything, the human seemed more relaxed than when he started. The next volunteer was Sarah Chen, who identified herself as a teacher of small humans. Veltar decided to try isolation horror, the fear of being alone in endless darkness. Sarah appeared in an empty void. No light, no sound, no sensations except the feeling of floating in nothingness. Most beings broke down within minutes when faced with complete sensory deprivation. Oh, this is peaceful, Sarah said, floating in the dark. It's like meditation. Very quiet. I should try this at home after dealing with 30 kindergartners all day. She began humming a soft tune. The melody echoed strangely in the void, but instead of being frightened by the distorted sound, Sarah seemed to enjoy the acoustic effect. The echo patterns are interesting, she mused. I wonder if this is how sound travels in space. My students would love to learn about this. Veltar added threatening whispers to the void, voices, speaking of doom and despair in languages that bypassed conscious thought, and spoke directly to primal fears. Oh, are those other languages? Sarah asked with interest. They sound beautiful even if I can't understand them. Do you have translation guides? I'd love to learn some basic phrases to make future visitors feel welcome. Behind Veltar, Thurok was making distressed croaking sounds. The amphibian's skin had turned a sickly gray color. Sir, Zixka whispered, these readings can't be correct. The humans should be experiencing terror, not curiosity. Veltar ended Sarah's test and called for the next volunteer. A teenage human named Ashley Williams stepped forward. She was young, which meant her fear responses should be even stronger and less controlled. Is this going to be like a horror movie? Ashley asked excitedly. I love horror movies. My favorites are the really scary ones that make other people scream. Veltar created a scenario filled with the undead, rotting corpses that shambled toward her with reaching hands and empty eye sockets. Zombie scenarios triggered deep evolutionary fears about disease and death. Ashley found herself surrounded by dozens of walking corpses. They moaned and reached for her with decaying fingers. Their rotting smell filled the air. Oh, these are classic zombies. Ashley pulled out a device, her communication tablet, and began recording. The makeup is incredible. How do you make the flesh look so realistically decomposed? She walked closer to examine one of the zombies. The detail work is amazing. Look at how the skin peels back from the bones. And the eye effects. Brilliant. The zombie grabbed for her. Ashley stepped aside easily and continued her examination. Wait, are these the fast zombies or the slow ones? These seem pretty slow. That's good. Fast zombies are less realistic. Real corpses wouldn't have working muscles for rapid movement. She turned to face where she thought the observers might be. Can you make them do the Thriller dance? That would be hilarious. Veltar increased the number of zombies. Soon Ashley was surrounded by hundreds of the creatures, all pressing closer. The scenario should have been overwhelming. This is like that zombie walk they do in the city every year. Ashley laughed, pulling out her tablet to take pictures. My friends are going to be so jealous. Can I get some selfies with them? She began posing with the zombies, making faces at her camera. When one zombie got too close, she simply pushed it away like it was bothering her while she tried to get the perfect shot. The lighting in here is really good for photos, she said, adjusting her angle. Very atmospheric. Veltar shut down the scenario in frustration. Ashley walked back to her seat, already posting her photos to something called social media. That was awesome, she announced to the room. Way better than the haunted house at the mall. Agnes raised her hand. Can I try the zombie one too? I love zombie movies. Though I prefer the ones with romance. Zombies need love too. Veltar looked at his team. They were all showing signs of extreme stress. Bloop had turned completely transparent, which meant panic in his species. Zixka was clicking her mandibles so fast it sounded like rainfall. Thurok had partially retreated into his protective shell. Perhaps we should try different scenarios, Zixka suggested weakly. Yes, Veltar agreed. We'll use the cultural fear database. Every species has specific terrors based on their evolutionary history. He accessed the human cultural files. Humans were afraid of many things according to their own entertainment. Ghosts, serial killers, giant spiders, clowns, and something called public speaking. Who wants to try next? Veltar asked. Every human in the room raised their hand. Veltar retreated to his ship with his team for an emergency meeting. The testing had gone on for 3 hours and every single scenario had failed. Humans had faced giant spiders, serial killers, ghosts, and even public speaking scenarios. They responded with fascination, critique, or mild amusement. This is impossible, Zixka said, her insect body trembling. The readings show they experience the fear stimulus, but then they analyze it instead of responding properly. One of them started giving acting advice to the holographic murderer, Thurok croaked. She said his technique was too over the top, and suggested he watch more realistic crime documentaries. Bloop pulsed a deep purple, the color of existential crisis. The elderly female brought knitting needles and worked on clothing, while surrounded by venomous spiders. She said they reminded her of her garden back home. Veltar checked the Galactic Fear Response database. In 50,000 years of testing, they had never encountered a species that treated terror scenarios as entertainment. Every other civilization had predictable breaking points. We have one option left, he said finally. The existential dread matrix. His team went silent. The matrix was their ultimate weapon, used only in the most extreme cases. It forced subjects to confront the heat death of the universe, the meaninglessness of existence, and their own cosmic insignificance. The device had driven entire warrior species to surrender rather than face it again. Sir, Zixka whispered, the Matrix has never failed, but it's also never been used on Death World creatures. We have our orders, Veltar said. The Galactic Council requires a complete fear assessment. If these humans are truly fearless, we need to know. They returned to the community center. The humans had somehow acquired more food during their absence. Someone had brought pizza, and the smell of cooked grain and fermented dairy products filled the air. The humans were eating while discussing the tests. The zombie effects were great, Ashley was saying, but I think the spider scenario needed work. Real giant spiders would move differently. I liked the public speaking one, said a man named Miguel, though having everyone in the audience turn into skeletons was a bit much. Real public speaking is scary enough without supernatural elements. Agnes looked up from her knitting. Are you ready for more tests, dear? She asked Veltar. We're having such a good time. Veltar set up the existential dread matrix. This device was larger and more complex than the fear machine. It didn't just create scenarios, it forced minds to truly comprehend concepts that broke most consciousness. This final test is different, he announced. It doesn't show you frightening images. Instead, it makes you understand certain truths about existence that most beings cannot handle. Philosophical horror? Miguel asked with interest. Like cosmic nihilism? I studied that in college. Fascinating stuff. You will experience the heat death of the universe, Veltar explained. You will feel the weight of cosmic time, the certainty that everything you know will end, and the ultimate meaninglessness of all actions in the face of entropy. Oh, like existentialism, said a woman named Janet. I teach philosophy at the local college. This should be interesting from an academic perspective. Veltar activated the matrix. The entire room disappeared, replaced by the vast emptiness of space. Stars flickered and died one by one. Galaxies drifted apart as the universe expanded into cold darkness. The humans felt themselves existing across billions of years, watching everything they had ever known or loved fade into nothing. Most beings screamed at this point. Some went catatonic. A few species had evolved mental defenses that simply shut down their consciousness rather than face this truth. The humans watched with fascination. Wow, Miguel said, floating in the cosmic void as stars died around him. This really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? The scale is incredible, Janet added. I mean, intellectually I knew about entropy, but experiencing it like this is completely different. This would be an amazing teaching tool for my students. Agnes was still knitting somehow. It's peaceful in a way. Like Harold always said, everything ends, so you might as well enjoy the time you have. Veltar increased the intensity. The humans experienced not just the death of stars, but the decay of matter itself. Protons dissolved. The very fabric of reality unraveled. They felt themselves witnessing the absolute end of everything, where not even the possibility of existence remained. This is what happens after the heat death? Sarah asked, still maintaining her curious teacher voice. I always wondered about that. Do the fundamental forces break down too, or just matter? The mathematical implications are staggering, Janet said. If information itself ceases to exist, does that mean the universe never happened? It's like asking if a tree makes sound when it falls with no one to hear it, but taken to the ultimate extreme. Jack, the former Marine, was nodding thoughtfully. You know, this makes my worst deployment seem pretty manageable. When you put it in cosmic perspective, most problems are pretty small. Ashley was trying to take pictures of the universe ending. This is going straight on social media. None of my friends will believe this. Veltar shut down the matrix. The humans returned to the community center, looking remarkably calm for beings who had just experienced ultimate cosmic horror. That was incredible, Miguel said. Do you have any books about cosmology? I'd love to learn more about this stuff. The visual effects were beautiful, Ashley added. Like the best nature documentary ever made. Agnes had somehow finished several rows of knitting during the experience. That was lovely, dear. Very relaxing. It reminded me of those planetarium shows Harold and I used to watch. Veltar stared at his readings. Not only had the humans survived the existential dread matrix, their stress levels had actually decreased. They were more relaxed now than when the test started. How? He asked, his crystal voice cracking with strain. How do you face the end of everything and feel calm? Well, Sarah said thoughtfully, it's not really scary when you think about it. I mean, it's not happening tomorrow. And even if it was, getting upset wouldn't change anything. Plus, Jack added, humans have been dealing with the idea of death forever. We know everything ends. That's why we try to make the time we have matter. And it was beautiful, Agnes said, looking up from her knitting. All those stars, all that time. We're part of something so much bigger than ourselves. That's not frightening, it's wonderful. Miguel nodded. Exactly. Instead of making life meaningless, it makes every moment precious. If this is all temporary, then we should enjoy it while we can. Veltar looked around the room. The humans were already planning their next activities. Someone suggested ordering more pizza. Ashley was showing her photos to friends over video chat. Agnes was teaching Janet a new knitting pattern. They had faced the ultimate horror of existence and responded by becoming more social, more creative, more alive. What do you fear? Veltar asked desperately. There must be something that terrifies you. The humans looked at each other thoughtfully. Boring meetings, Jack said finally. Running out of coffee. Miguel added. Stepping on my cat in the dark, Sarah contributed. Getting a bad haircut right before photo day, Ashley said. Agnes nodded seriously. Having to throw away leftovers because they went bad. Such a waste. Veltar realized with growing horror that he hadn't found what humans feared most. He had taught humans what everyone else feared most, and now they were asking questions. The question started innocently enough. How does the fear projection technology work? Miguel asked, examining the matrix with obvious interest. Is it some kind of neural interface, or does it manipulate local reality? Veltar had answered similar questions from scientists across the galaxy. Usually he felt proud to explain his work. But something about Miguel's curiosity made him nervous. It reads brainwave patterns and amplifies fear responses through quantum consciousness manipulation, he explained, carefully. Fascinating, Janet said, taking notes. So it essentially weaponizes psychology? What kind of range does it have? Weaponizes? Veltar's crystal body darkened. This is a scientific instrument for assessment purposes only. Of course, Janet said quickly. I just meant theoretically if someone wanted to use fear as a tool for control, this technology could do that. Before Veltar could answer, Sarah had another question. What other species have you tested? Do they all respond the same way? Each species has unique fear patterns based on their evolutionary history, Zixka answered. Predator species fear loss of dominance. Prey species fear pursuit. Hive minds fear isolation. So you have a complete psychological profile of every species in the galaxy? Jack asked. His tone was casual, but Veltar noticed the former Marine was paying very close attention to the answer. The Galactic Council requires complete fear assessments for all member species, Thurak said. It helps maintain peace and understanding. How considerate, Agnes said, looking up from her knitting. It's always good to understand what makes people uncomfortable. That way you can avoid upsetting them accidentally. Something about the way she said it made Bloop pulse bright red with alarm. Can I see some of the test footage? Ashley asked. For, artistic inspiration? I'm studying film production. The assessment files are classified, Veltar said firmly. Oh, of course, Ashley said. But hypothetically, if someone wanted to make a really effective horror movie for different alien species, this research would be super helpful, right? The humans continued asking questions while they shared their pizza. Each question seemed innocent by itself, but together they painted a disturbing picture. The humans were systematically gathering intelligence about galactic civilization's psychological weaknesses. Agnes, Sarah said, didn't you mention you were organizing the neighborhood Halloween celebration this year? Oh yes, dear, Agnes replied, her needles clicking steadily. We're planning something special. 43 houses are participating this year, and we've been sharing ideas online with other communities around the world. What's Halloween? Zixka asked. Despite Veltar's warning look, the humans exchanged glances that somehow managed to be both innocent and terrifying. It's a holiday dedicated to fear, Miguel explained. We spend months preparing scary displays, then children go door to door collecting treats while being frightened by various horrors. You frighten your offspring for entertainment? Thurak croaked, his skin turning pale green. They love it, Jack said with a grin. The scarier the better. Last year, my neighbor built a haunted house in his garage. Kids came from 3 counties over to experience it. Some of them went through multiple times. We have contests, Ashley added. Best costume, scariest decoration, most creative horror scene. Entire neighborhoods compete to see who can create the most effective terror. It sounds like military psychological warfare training, Zixka whispered. Oh no, Sarah said cheerfully. It's much more sophisticated than that. Military training is about breaking people down. Halloween is about creating exactly the right amount of fear to be enjoyable. It's a much more complex challenge. Veltar felt his crystal structure vibrating with stress. You're saying your entire species practices psychological manipulation as a recreational activity? Well, when you put it that way, it sounds sinister, Agnes said. We prefer to think of it as fear appreciation, like wine tasting but for terror. Fear appreciation, Bloop repeated faintly. Oh yes, Agnes continued. Different people prefer different types of scares. Some like sudden surprise, others enjoy building dread. There are people who specialize in psychological horror, and others who focus on visual shock. It's quite an art form. We've been doing it for thousands of years, Miguel added. Every culture on Earth has traditions around controlled fear experiences. Ghost stories, scary dances, ritual scares during coming-of-age ceremonies. We've had a lot of practice. A lot of practice, Thurrock repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Janet looked up from her notes. It's really quite remarkable from an anthropological perspective. Most species seem to develop fear responses purely for survival. Humans are unique in that we've turned fear into entertainment, education, and social bonding. Social bonding? Veltar asked weakly. Oh, absolutely, Sarah said. Shared fear experiences bring people together. Couples go to scary movies to hold hands during the frightening parts. Friends dare each other to try increasingly scary activities. Fear creates trust and intimacy. Plus, Jack added, it's excellent training. If you can stay calm while being chased by a guy with a chainsaw, even if you know it's fake, you're better prepared for real emergencies. Guy with a chainsaw? Zixka's mandibles clicked rapidly. It's a power tool, Ashley explained helpfully, used for cutting trees, but in horror contexts it makes a great scary sound effect. Very loud and threatening. Agnes nodded approvingly. Harold always said the chainsaw was a classic. Simple, effective, time-tested. You can't go wrong with the classics. Veltar realized the humans had somehow taken control of the conversation. Instead of being tested, they were educating his team about human fear culture, and the more he learned, the more terrified he became. So, Miguel said, leaning back in his chair, this fear assessment technology of yours, it must be pretty valuable, right? I mean, if someone could reverse engineer it, they could create some amazing entertainment applications. It could revolutionize the horror industry. Ashley agreed. Imagine being able to customize scary experiences for different personality types. Or educational applications, Janet added. Controlled fear responses could be excellent for teaching stress management and emotional regulation. And team-building exercises, Jack said. Nothing brings a group together like surviving a shared scary experience. The therapeutic possibilities are endless, Sarah chimed in. Exposure therapy for phobias, confidence building, personal growth through controlled challenge. Agnes looked up from her knitting one more time. You boys should stay for Halloween. It's only 3 weeks away. You could see how we do things here on Earth. Stay? Veltar asked. Oh yes, Agnes said sweetly. I insist. Consider it part of the cultural exchange. After all you've learned about our fear responses, now we should learn about yours. The humans all smiled at the alien assessment team. They were the same friendly smiles they had worn all day, but now Veltar could see something else behind them. Curiosity, scientific interest, and the patient, predatory focus of creatures who had turned fear itself into an art form. Outside, the sun was setting. Soon it would be dark. 3 weeks later, Veltar stood in what the humans called Agnes Thompson's backyard, wondering how his life had gone so wrong. His team's ship remained mysteriously inoperable. Miguel had offered to help with repairs, but every time he fixed something, 2 new problems appeared. It's just old technology, Miguel had explained cheerfully. These older model hyperdrive systems are tricky. Good thing we have plenty of time to figure it out. Now Veltar understood they weren't stranded by accident. They were being detained by the friendliest, most polite kidnappers in galactic history. Dr. Veltar, Agnes called from her back porch. Come see what we've prepared for you. The backyard had been transformed. What had once been a simple garden was now a maze of horror that made Veltar's fear assessment equipment look like children's toys. Fake tombstones emerged from artificial fog. Skeleton hands reached up from freshly dug graves. Motion sensors triggered screaming sounds and sudden movements from hidden monsters. Isn't it wonderful? Agnes beamed with pride. The whole neighborhood worked together. Mrs. Peterson contributed the sound effects. She used to work in theater. The Johnson family built the graveyard scene, and little Tommy designed the haunted maze using some very advanced mathematics. Veltar looked at the maze. The paths curved in ways that seemed to violate geometry. Walls shifted when no one was looking directly at them. The whole structure felt bigger inside than it appeared from outside. How did you build this? He asked weakly. Oh, we had some inspiration, Agnes said. That holographic technology of yours gave us some wonderful ideas. We couldn't replicate it exactly, but we found some creative workarounds. Through the fog, Veltar could see other yards. Every house on the street had been converted into a different type of horror experience. One featured a carnival theme with twisted clowns and broken carousel music. Another had created a zombie apocalypse scene complete with burning cars and shambling figures. The beauty of it, Jack explained, appearing beside them in what appeared to be authentic military gear, is that each house targets different fear responses. We've got everything covered: claustrophobia, heights, insects, social anxiety, body horror, existential dread. Something for everyone. Body horror? Zixka asked, her voice barely audible. Oh, the Henderson family went all out, Sarah said, joining the group. She was dressed as something called a witch and carrying a smoking cauldron. They created this amazing display about transformation and mutation. Very artistic. The special effects look so real you'd swear they were actually changing people into monsters. Thurok made a sound like a dying fish. And the beautiful thing, Janet added, approaching with a clipboard, is that we've been documenting everything. Response times, fear triggers, effectiveness ratings. We're building quite a database. Database? Feltar whispered. For next year, of course, Agnes said. We want to make sure we can provide appropriate scares for all our new alien friends. Word has gotten out about your visit, and we're expecting visitors from several other species next Halloween. Other species? Oh yes, Miguel said, materializing from behind a fake tombstone. We've been in contact with some of your colleagues. The ones who tested the Zephyrians seemed very interested in our methods, and apparently the Hive World 7 assessment team wants to study our group fear dynamics. Ashley bounded over, wearing an elaborate costume covered in fake blood, and we've been uploading videos to the Galactic internet. The response has been amazing. Apparently, humans are becoming quite famous for our unique approach to psychological experiences. You're sharing human fear techniques with the galaxy? Feltar asked in horror. Cultural exchange, Agnes said happily. Though we've had to tone down some of our ideas. Apparently, most species aren't ready for our advanced concepts yet. Advanced concepts? Well, Sarah explained. We mentioned some of our classic horror themes, like the idea that the real monster is humanity itself, or cosmic horror where the universe is fundamentally hostile to consciousness. And several civilizations' philosophical departments had complete breakdowns. Apparently, Jack added with a grin, the concept of body horror, fear of your own physical form being altered or corrupted, is so alien to most species that just describing it causes existential crises. And don't get started on psychological horror, Janet said, making notes on her clipboard. The idea of being afraid of your own mind, your own thoughts and perceptions, is completely foreign to most galactic species. Agnes nodded sagely. They're not ready for the sophisticated scares yet. We'll have to start them with simpler fears and work up to the complex ones. Simple fears, Bloop repeated, his entire body now a pale, frightened white. The first group of human children appeared at the edge of the yard. They were small, young humans dressed as various monsters and carrying bags for collecting treats. They saw the alien assessment team and waved cheerfully. Trick or treat, they called out in unison. Oh, wonderful. Agnes clapped her hands. Children, these are our special guests from space. They're here to learn about Halloween. The small humans immediately surrounded the aliens, chattering excitedly about costumes and candy, and who had the best decorations this year. They showed no fear of the alien visitors. In fact, they seemed to think Veltar's crystal body and his team's unusual appearances were part of the Halloween experience. Are you guys supposed to be aliens? One small human asked. That's so cool. The makeup looks totally real. We are real aliens, Zixka said faintly. Awesome. The child replied. Do you want to come trick-or-treating with us? We know all the best houses. Before the aliens could answer, the children had surrounded them and begun leading them toward the street. Agnes followed, beaming with pride. Isn't this wonderful, she said. The children are so excited to share our traditions with new friends. As they walked through the neighborhood, Veltar saw the full scope of what the humans had created. Every house was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. The decorations weren't just scary. They were scientifically designed to trigger specific fear responses while keeping the experience enjoyable rather than traumatic. More impressively, the humans had somehow learned to read alien body language. As they moved from house to house, Veltar noticed that each display seemed calibrated to push his team's buttons, without crossing the line into actual panic. How do you know exactly how much fear to apply? He asked Agnes as they watched Thurok experience something called a haunted aquarium that featured underwater monsters. Oh, that's the real skill, Agnes replied. Any fool can terrify someone. The art is in creating just enough fear to be exciting without being harmful. It takes practice and observation and a deep understanding of psychology. You've weaponized fear, Veltar said with growing realization. Oh no, dear, Agnes corrected gently. We've domesticated it. Fear used to control us, so we learned to control fear instead. Now it serves us rather than the other way around. As the evening progressed, Veltar watched human children as young as 5 years old navigate complex horror scenarios with laughter and delight. They evaluated scares with the critical eye of experts, rating performances and suggesting improvements. The zombie could use more shambling. One small human advised another house's decorator, and maybe some groaning sounds. But the torn clothes effect is really good. These tiny humans were already experts in psychological manipulation. They had been trained from birth to analyze, appreciate, and ultimately control fear. The final stop was the community center where the testing had begun. Inside, the humans had prepared what they called a finale experience. This is our special treat for you, Miguel said, leading them inside. A collaborative effort from the whole neighborhood. The room had been converted into something that defied description. It combined elements from every fear the aliens had experienced, but somehow made them beautiful rather than terrifying. The existential void was there, but filled with warm light and gentle music. The predator scenarios had become an elegant dance. The zombie apocalypse had been transformed into a celebration of life overcoming death. We realized, Sarah explained as they walked through the experience, that you probably haven't had many positive fear experiences. So we wanted to show you what fear could be when it's not about survival, when it's about growth and joy and community. At the center of the room sat Agnes, still knitting, surrounded by representations of cosmic horror that had been somehow rendered comforting rather than threatening. She looked up as they approached. Did you enjoy Halloween, dear? She asked Veltar. Veltar looked around at the impossible beauty surrounding them. His team was no longer trembling with terror. They were experiencing something like wonder. The humans had taken everything that made beings afraid and turned it into art. What are you? He asked finally. Agnes smiled and went back to her knitting. We're just humans, dear. We're the people who looked at a universe full of things that wanted to eat us, and decided to laugh instead of cry. She paused in her work and looked up at him with eyes that held the wisdom of a species that had turned terror into joy. The question is, she said gently, what are you going to tell the Galactic Council about us?